What's the difference between pitch decks that secured millions in funding like those from Airbnb, Slack, and Uber, and those that get approximately $0 in funding? And more importantly, what can we learn about selling and presenting our ideas from some of the world's most effective pitch decks of all time? In this video, I'm going to show you how to simply and effectively communicate your ideas so that you aren't just pitching to people, you're actually helping them see your product or idea as the solution to a big problem they're having. We'll take a look at 3 of the most popular pitch decks of all time and draw lessons from them that you can use in your own pitch deck as well. The first pitch deck I want to show you is from Airbnb, which did an outstanding job at making its big ideas simple and clear. They did this not only through their messaging, but in their visuals as well. You can easily understand their pitch as you scroll through the deck without anyone even presenting it. And that's one of the key ingredients of a powerful pitch deck. It's simple and it visually demonstrates your idea. Remember, your pitch deck isn't a teleprompter, it's a visual aid. It's there to help you communicate your big idea. To demonstrate this, let's take a look at Airbnb's pitch deck back in 2009. During this time, Airbnb was still an unknown company. They had been operating for a few years already, but this is the pitch deck that landed them $500,000 in funding from investors. As we go through these slides, I want you to pay attention to how simple the presentation is. There's only one idea per slide, but the visuals demonstrate their pitch so well that the audience can understand it, even if no one is talking. Take a look at the opening slide. Look, it's just their name and their tagline. But right from the get-go, Airbnb already builds intrigue thanks to their tagline. It's a kind of tagline that not only explains what they do, but can easily spark curiosity for investors, especially back then when the idea was new. The key to why this tagline worked, in my opinion, is that it's so simple and it draws a very surprising contrast that makes you want to know more. Booking rooms with locals rather than hotels? Think about the audience back then. They're probably thinking, stay with locals, how would that even work? It creates cognitive dissonance that makes the audience want to keep listening to get that answer. Then, Airbnb immediately jumps into describing the problems and desires of their target customers. Focusing on a specific target audience is actually one of the things we see most people avoiding because they want to appeal to everyone. But that's a mistake. Whether you're pitching to investors, directly to consumers, or even an internal team, laying out problems shows your audience that you understand them and you know what's going on. And it builds the case for your solution. Airbnb shrinks their target customers' problems into just 3 bullet points, making it super easy for potential investors to see which problems they're trying to solve. Then comes the solution, which is, once again, super simple. All they put in their slide is 1 sentence to explain what they are and 3 benefits for both travelers and hosts. Airbnb was very serious about eliminating all of those extra details from their deck. There's another crucial principle we can take away from this deck. When building your own slide deck, try to distill your ideas into few words as possible. Think of it as an elevator pitch of sorts, where you have to show your value with only 1 slide and be clear, concise, and memorable. So now I'm going to flip through a few of these slides, but as I go through, notice how each slide has 1 topic and only 2 to 3 examples, just like this market validation slide here, this market size slide, this slide showing how the platform works, how they make money, and even this adoption strategy. They split their different channels into 3 strategies to keep things simple. Then we get to this slide, which shows where Airbnb stands with its competitors. The brilliant thing about this slide is that even though the idea here is more complex than the ones in the other slides, it still only takes a few seconds for you to understand all the information here. Essentially, what Airbnb is saying is that they are the cheapest fully online option in the market. So if you run into a complicated point while preparing your pitch deck, try to think of an out-of-the-box visual that will get your point across in a few seconds. For example, you can add a table showing how your product's features stack up against your competitors. Or if you're trying to improve efficiency, you can create a graph showing the biggest opportunities that would yield the most results. The key is making it easy to understand and not too busy. I actually think this Airbnb example could use a little design polish to help give it more clarity. Whatever you do, make sure that someone can immediately understand what the visual is saying. Lean into making powerful comparisons about the size or numbers. Make the differences between your idea and the other solutions very clear. Notice on this competitive advantage side how there is actually not 3, but 6 points. I think this is pushing it a little bit, but it works for them because there are so few words on the screen and the blue boxes containing big ideas help those stand out. Now I'm going to skip to the very last slide in their deck, but if you want to see the whole deck, I put the link in the description. And here's the grand finale. Again, notice how they summarized what they're looking for in just one sentence. Then they put a nice little graphic of their expected revenue, and they tied that directly with the investment, showing what they thought would be possible with the seed money. Today, Airbnb has become a household name, but remember, when they were putting this pitch deck together, hardly anyone knew about them. And yet, because of how simple and precise their pitch was, they were able to secure $500,000 that they were looking for. So learn from their example and create a pitch deck that says everything it needs to say, but nothing more. Build intrigue with your first slide. Shrink your target audience. Find creative ways to express complex ideas, and most of all, keep things simple. Another company that did an amazing job with their pitch deck was Slack, but it's actually for a much different reason than what we saw with Airbnb's great deck. And this deck shows what might be the most powerful principle you can use in your presentation to influence your audience. Today, Slack is one of the primary online collaboration platforms for business. However, when they were still getting started, they had to prove to investors why using their platform was better than the dozens of other options that were out there. The way Slack did this was by building a gap between what was currently available and what their new platform could bring to the table. This is something we call the what is, or the present state the audience is in with problems and challenges, and the what could be, the future that the audience could achieve with your solution, one without those same problems and challenges. We have a detailed video on this presentation structure that you can watch right after this by clicking the link below. Slack wanted to tell the story of how their solution could end the endless email chains that were even worse back then. And that's saying something because almost no one I know has less than 100 emails in their inbox. They wanted their audience to see a future where remote collaboration was simple, organized, and efficient. They start with a super simple introduction, just their name with hands, which signifies collaboration. And they immediately jump into what they are and how they're better than the current system. Back then, most teams would use several different tools to get tasks done. They would send emails to each other, message each other on social media, get on video calls with Skype. Yes, Skype. Look it up. And use a lot of different apps for collaborating. That's why Slack immediately gets into what they're here to do. And they're here to centralize collaboration. Give it modern social media features. From the get-go, they lay the groundwork for what is cluttered and efficient communication that everyone in the audience is tired of, and what could be centralized, easy communication. What follows is a history of the team's projects before creating Slack. They wanted to demonstrate here that they're not some random startup. They're a company that knows how to build software that people love. Ludicorp was a software company. Flickr was a very popular photo sharing website, and Glitch is a video game. Combining all the experience from these 3 endeavors, they created Slack. This is a really effective strategy you can use to show your journey to arriving at your solution. The Slack team tried many different things before landing on this product, and all of them had elements that they used in Slack. It tells the story of how they eventually found the solution on their 4th try. You don't want to give a history lesson here just for the sake of one, but stories captivate people. And if your story shows how you identified the ultimate solution, it gives both you and your company more credibility. Now we get into what Slack can do. Remember, during this time, most people would send emails to each other, chat on social media, and video call in Skype. I'm sure while presenting this pitch, the team stressed how messy communication channels could be for a work team. That's why they present one of their biggest promises, simple communication. And the visual they use represents a simple interface with the back-end power of all the apps. They showed you that you can create chat rooms, or channels as they call it. They showed you that you can mention people to get their attention, or send them a direct message. And they showed their activity feed where everyone on the team can easily catch up with all the updates. It's all super simple, but these short bullet points give a clear picture of how amazing collaboration could be. Notice how they're hitting on what could be here. They're trying to build a huge gap between the future they could help them create and the present state of work communication. They continue doing this throughout the deck, often switching back and forth between the two. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a few slides to show you a few specific ways they do this brilliantly. Slack then goes to their competitors. And while it might not seem like it, this actually is furthering the gap between what is and what could be. Can you see why? All of their competitors do some of what they do, but they have features that combine them all. They're basically saying, and I quite brilliantly might add, that these are competitors who only do a single piece of what they do. They are the competitors you're currently using multiple of to do the job that Slack can do for you. Then they move to their final slide, the slide that ends with the beautiful future they have been describing. This is the culmination of the wide gap they've been trying to create between the current state of workplace communication and the potential future of a streamlined, efficient, organized tool that would replace all the disjointed ones. Ending on a statement like this creates a resounding moment, leaving the audience a choice of whether they will continue with the terrible way workplace communication has been happening, or if they would give Slack a shot. Do the same thing. Describe the present state of things, the problems, desires, and challenges your audience face on a daily basis, then the future, where those problems could be gone, challenges overcome, and desires met with a solution you're presenting. Continually switch between the two. I promise you, this will change everything for any sort of presentation you do. Our last example is Uber's pitch deck from way back in the day. And this one made the list because it does a great job of telling a story with data. This is an art you must master to give a persuasive pitch of any kind. You can't simply dump data on people. It won't mean anything. You have to tell the story behind the data. You have to help the audience see why it's meaningful and how it impacts them. So this example is pretty much the culmination of everything we talked about so far. Back when Uber made this pitch in 2008, not only was ride-sharing unheard of, but mobile apps were still new. Apple was just launching their App Store in that same year, so Uber also had to show investors that mobile apps were the future. Now, Uber's pitch deck definitely has some room for improvement in terms of their presentation design, but I want you to focus on how they tell a story with data. They almost use the idea of what is versus what could be with data. And as we go over these slides, you'll see that their original idea is slightly different from how Uber actually turned out. Their original idea was a premium taxi service, something similar to what Uber Black is today. Uber starts their pitch deck by going over problems people were having with traditional taxis in New York. They use specific facts about taxis to start laying the groundwork for why they aren't a good solution. You can see vibes of describing what is here, can't you? These two techniques often go in tandem. While most of these aren't real data points, other than the fact that the most common car used as a cab gets 14 miles per gallon, they are telling a story using facts. And this story becomes much more powerful as they continue going through their deck. They then move into the issues taxi drivers are facing. This shifts from consumers to the service providers. They use cost data to continue driving home the point that the current system is broken at every level. They want their audience to realize that taxis are no good for anyone. Now they shifted to the what could be, where they directly contrast their vision against the broken system of taxis. Again, no specific data is used here, but the point is, the story the data tells is more impactful than the data itself. They could have said things like, this concept would be 43% more efficient, or the drivers would get paid 24% more, which would improve incentives, thus improving service. They do get into more specific numbers as this goes along, but they are leaning into the data story, not as much the data points. Here's where things start getting interesting. Look at how simple this data is. They could have talked in terms of general cost savings, time savings, or crime statistics associated with cabs. Instead, they put the data in very simple terms. Cabs can take 45 minutes. That's a very long time, especially if you're going to work. Car services require a notice and also charge $60 in tax. You can start visualizing how frustrating these downsides are. Even as I'm saying it right now, I am cringing at the idea of having to wait 45 minutes for a cab when I'm in a hurry, or forgetting to put in your notice for the car service before I needed it, then having to find a new way to get where I was going. They wrap this up with a powerful big idea. It's faster and cheaper than a limo and nicer and safer than a taxi cab. Again, look how simple the data is on this slide. Even though they aren't using many graphs, which I think is one of the main digs I have on this slide deck. They are using very simple data. 35% of time spent looking for fares is insane. Then contrasting with the 14 miles per gallon for the average taxi, they use cars that are 2 times more efficient. This whole time, they're quickly switching between what is and what could be, and creating a large gap that will set them up at the end of their presentation. They then continue with the efficiency idea by directly comparing MPG numbers instead of giving percentage increase. 30 miles per gallon versus 14 seems like a much bigger difference than a 53% increase in efficiency. This is something to think through when you're trying to determine how best to present your data. There's a lot of psychology that goes into this. Certain percentages or hard numbers sound or feel very different. Sometimes visually representing the difference makes it feel bigger. There are all kinds of things you could do, so always think through the best way to position your numbers. I think Uber does a solid job of that, even though I don't love the lack of graphs and how stale the design is. Here, Uber starts using more numbers to give validity to their idea. Everything to this point has sounded great, but at the end of the day, they had to prove to investors there was actually a market for this. Knowing their audience's concerns and anticipating their most likely objections or questions, they start digging into the market. And as they do, they're actually continually supporting their big idea. Yes, this market is big, growing quickly, but it's based on a broken system. They're essentially trying to show investors that they are sitting on a golden opportunity, a market ready for the taking. And this is where they establish their what could be even more specifically to their audience of investors. They're trying to show them that this could be one of the best and safest investments they could make, and every investor wants a return on their investment. We finally get to see a graph, and even better, it's one of the 3 graphs everyone can understand: bar, pie, and line. As a side note, don't get crazy with your graphs. If you remember, Airbnb did, and I think it worked for them, but it was a risky play. The beauty of this graph is that it shows that this huge market they've been talking about is actually mostly made up of the market segment they think they'll do best in, the retail market. At this point in the deck, you have to know investors were licking their chops. I think Uber did a great job of communicating that there's a huge market with a broken system and it's ready for complete disruption. Hindsight is 2020, knowing what Uber has become, but I certainly feel convinced that I would have invested if I was in the room based on this deck. And finally, they showed the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario. Back then, getting $1 billion in revenue was a base case scenario. Little did they know in 2024 that they would make $44 billion in revenue. This is a great ending because it wraps a bow on what the investors were probably thinking throughout this whole presentation. This seems like a good investment. I wonder how much money I could make. Giving a specific number with a B was a great move. It made this investment seem like a complete no-brainer. Throughout this deck, Uber used a lot of numbers, but it didn't necessarily seem like a ton of statistics. They used their numbers within their story framework. They told a story with their data that moved the investors to pull the trigger. And if you can accomplish a similar feat, you will drastically increase your chances of influencing your audience. These 3 pitch decks are littered with universal principles that can supercharge any presentation you give, whether to investors, your team, prospective client, or even during a keynote. These principles, simplicity, creating a gap between what is and what could be, and telling stories with data, are best used together. Those are 3 key ingredients in every great presentation, but there are actually a few more, and we made an exclusive resource that covers all of them, so you can make presentations that captivate and influence whoever your audience is. Simply click the link at the top of your screen or in the description to get instant access. Until next time.